There comes a moment in life when your silence starts to feel like a betrayal to your own soul, when your kindness becomes a currency that people spend without paying back, when you start wondering, why do I give so much and get so little? You bend, you break, you bleed, and still they act like your love, your effort, your time is disposable. You smile to keep the peace. You say yes when your heart is screaming no. You forgive people who never apologize. You keep showing up for those who would never do the same for you. And they call it love. They call it loyalty. But I call it self-neglect. Let me ask you something. How many times have you been the hero in someone else's story while becoming the villain in your own? How many times have you been the one to pour and pour and pour only to be left empty? It's time to stop. Stop being the nice person. If that means you have to lose yourself. Because being nice at the expense of your dignity is not kindness, it's self-destruction. There's a difference between being kind and being a pushover. And deep down, you know it. But the world has trained you to confuse the two. They told you if you speak up, you're difficult. If you say no, you're cold. If you walk away from disrespect, you're heartless. And so you learned to be quiet. You learned to shrink. You learned to swallow the things that hurt you so others could feel comfortable. And somewhere along the way, you started thinking that this was the right way to love, that this was the right way to live. But let me tell you something hard. Being the one who always forgives, always sacrifices, always says, I'm fine, when you're breaking, that doesn't make you noble. That makes you invisible. That makes you an easy target for people who don't know how to love, but know exactly how to take. You're not here to be walked over. You're not here to live in apology. Being a good person should never mean living in pain so others can live in peace. If your goodness has to come at the cost of your worth, then it's time to redefine what good really means. You weren't born to be anyone's emotional sponge. You weren't created to be the one everyone dumps their problems on while they never ask if you're okay. You were not sent into this world to carry the weight of everyone else's comfort, approval, and healing while ignoring your own. But somewhere along the line, you were convinced that love means being selfless to the point of self-abandonment. That kindness means saying yes, even when your soul is screaming no. You keep the peace, you keep your mouth shut, you let the disrespect slide, and they applaud you for being nice. But that's not niceness, that's fear. That's the fear of being called selfish, rude, or heartless. So you let them get away with things they would never tolerate. You let them use your silence as permission. You let them label your patience as weakness. You think you're being strong, but real strength isn't quiet suffering. Real strength is knowing when enough is enough. When your kindness turns into your own punishment, you've crossed the line. And it's time you remember, you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your suffering. You owe yourself your voice. They don't thank you for always being there. They expect it. And if you miss a step, if you say no just once, if you draw a boundary, suddenly you're the bad guy. Suddenly you've changed. Suddenly you're the problem. That's not love. That's manipulation. Because people who truly care about you won't punish you for protecting your peace. The problem is you've made it too easy for them to depend on you while doing nothing for you. They see you always picking up the pieces, always fixing what they break, always showing up even when they're absent, and they've grown comfortable. Comfortable taking, comfortable forgetting, comfortable disrespecting. That's not your role. That's not your identity. You are not their backup plan, their emotional crutch, or their scapegoat. You're a human being who deserves respect just as much as you give it. So why do you keep acting like your needs are an inconvenience? Why do you keep shrinking yourself for people who wouldn't bend for you? Don't let the label of nice trap you in a life of unspoken pain. Start standing, start speaking. Because being kind does not mean allowing others to treat you like you're disposable. It's not your job to fix broken people who refuse to pick up the pieces of their own lives. It's not your responsibility to carry their healing, especially when they keep reopening their wounds by choice. But you've made it your mission to save everyone but yourself. You've become the go-to, the reliable one, the one who always says, I've got you. And you keep doing it over and over, hoping that one day someone will say, I've got you too, but they don't. They won't, because they've never had to. You've shown them that you'll break your back for people who won't lift a finger for you. That you'll cancel your own needs for their convenience, that you'll sacrifice your joy for their comfort. And they take and take and take until you forget what it feels like to be full. But you don't need to be the hero in everybody's story. You don't need to be the one holding the weight of relationships that feel one-sided. That's not kindness. That's exhaustion. That's a soul running on empty. If people only love you for what you give them, then they don't love you. They love your usefulness. There's a difference. You think you're being mature by letting things slide. You think you're being spiritual by turning the other cheek every time. But let's be real. You're hurting. You're tired. You're full of silent anger. You walk around with a smile that's cracking at the corners, trying to convince yourself that it's better to keep the peace than to make noise. But peace isn't real if it costs you your voice. Peace isn't peace if it only exists because you pretend everything's okay. That's a prison. That's emotional slavery. You don't speak up because you're scared of confrontation, but what if I told you that your fear of confrontation is really just a fear of being rejected? You're afraid they'll leave if you stop being easy to manipulate. You're afraid they'll call you too much if you stop being silent. But let them walk, let them go. Because the right people won't leave when you stand up for yourself. They'll applaud you. The right people will love you harder when you finally love yourself enough to stop being a landing pad for disrespect. You don't have to keep suffering in silence just to be accepted. Real love doesn't ask you to suffer. You've trained people to believe you don't mind being mistreated, not with words, but with your actions, with your silence, with the way you keep showing up for people who consistently let you down. They learned that you'll always be there, that you'll always forgive, that no matter how deep the cut, you'll patch it up and act like it didn't hurt. And now they don't even try to change. They don't say sorry. They don't correct their disrespect. They just assume you'll get over it. And you do. Not because you've healed, but because you've convinced yourself it's not worth the fight. But what's the cost of that choice? The slow erosion of your self-respect. Every time you stay silent, you're teaching them that their behavior is acceptable. Every time you pretend it didn't hurt, you're giving them a license to hurt you again. You deserve better. But first, you have to believe that, because people will only value you at the level you value yourself. If you want respect, you have to demand it. And sometimes demanding respect means walking away from the very people you once bent over backward for. You're not weak for wanting to be loved. You're not wrong for wanting to be chosen. But you are responsible for making sure that love doesn't come at the cost of your soul. Because real love doesn't require you to tolerate abuse, disrespect, or neglect. Real love sees you. Real love values you. Real love doesn't leave you questioning your worth every night. But what happens when you spent so long being the nice person is you forget what it feels like to be respected. You get used to crumbs and call it a feast. You get used to pain and call it patience. You confuse loyalty with self-betrayal. And you think if you just keep loving harder, they'll change. But love doesn't fix people. It reveals who they really are. And if someone only sticks around because they know you won't walk away, that's not love, that's convenience. You are not a backup option. You are not a safety net. You are not someone to be used, abused, and then praised for being strong. Stop breaking your own heart just to keep someone else comfortable. Stop staying in places where your worth is questioned instead of honored. There's something dangerous about always putting others first. It sounds noble, it sounds virtuous, but when it becomes a lifestyle, it leaves you empty. It leaves you bitter. Because eventually you start looking around and realizing that nobody is putting you first. Nobody is pouring into you the way you pour into them, and instead of feeling appreciated, you feel abandoned. You feel invisible. And then you blame yourself. You think maybe you're not enough. Maybe you're too sensitive. Maybe if you were just a little more patient, a little more giving, they'd finally see your worth. But listen, the right people don't need you to suffer to see your value. The right people don't need to break you to learn how to love you. They don't need your silence to feel strong. And they don't need your submission to feel respected. So stop playing small. Stop putting yourself last and calling it humility. That's not humility. That's self-erasure. You deserve to be loved in the same way you love others. You deserve to be seen, heard, and honored, not just used when it's convenient. They keep calling you too nice, but what they really mean is you're easy to manipulate. They know you'll forgive them before they apologize. They know you'll show up even when they cancel on you. They know you'll clean up the mess, even if they're the ones who made it. And instead of changing, they keep taking, they keep draining, because they know you won't stop them. That's not your identity. That's your pattern. And patterns can be broken. You don't have to keep living in the cycle of giving and never receiving. You don't have to keep proving your worth to people who treat you like an option. You are not required to suffer in silence so someone else can feel good about themselves. The truth is, they don't value you because you've never demanded to be valued. But that changes now. It has to, because your soul cannot afford another day of pretending that you're okay, pretending that you don't mind, pretending that nice is enough to keep you whole. It's not. And you deserve more than just being tolerated. You deserve to be respected, fully, loudly, and without conditions. You've mistaken being easygoing for being lovable. You've mistaken your ability to endure pain as a sign of strength. But what if I told you that the strongest thing you could do is say enough? Enough of the late night tears, enough of carrying dead weight relationships, enough of being the only one who tries. You've been quiet for too long. You've been patient for too long, and it's eaten you alive. Being the nice person has become a mask, a cover for your fear of rejection, a disguise for your lack of boundaries. But masks get heavy, and sooner or later they start to crack. You don't owe the world your constant compliance. You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace over people. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to protect your space, and you are allowed to stop setting yourself on fire just to keep others warm. That's not love. That's sacrifice. And it's one you don't need to keep making. Not anymore. When you consistently allow things to slide, people will begin to assume that your silence is a form of agreement. The more you fail to speak up, the more they'll test your boundaries. Human nature often reacts to what's permitted more than what's explicitly stated. If you don't stand firm on your values, your time, or your peace, people will slowly begin to chip away at those things. And the problem is most people aren't even consciously trying to hurt you. They're just operating based on what you allow. If you allow someone to interrupt you over and over, they'll continue to do it. If you let someone guilt trip you into doing favors you don't want to do, they'll see it as a way to get their needs met. It becomes a pattern. And once that pattern is established, it becomes hard to break. Your silence becomes your signature. Your tolerance becomes their license. Over time, you might look up and realize you don't even recognize your own life anymore. You're constantly reacting instead of living intentionally. That's what happens when you fail to defend your energy, your peace, your values, and your worth. Others take over what you don't protect. You might think that being passive keeps the peace, but it often just delays the storm. When you avoid uncomfortable conversations or ignore disrespect, it doesn't vanish. It just gathers energy under the surface. Eventually it erupts, either as burnout, resentment, or total withdrawal. The tragedy is that all of this could have been prevented had you simply drawn a clear line in the sand. People aren't mind readers, and many won't naturally assume where your line is unless you point it out. Every time you choose to remain silent instead of speaking your truth, you're essentially training the people around you to expect more silence. They'll believe they can walk into your space, take what they want, and leave without consequences. The more they get away with, the more they assume they're entitled to, and when you finally try to push back, they act shocked, as if you're the one being unreasonable. That's because you allowed the imbalance to grow unchecked. Defending yourself early isn't about aggression or anger. It's about self-respect. It's about making sure that people understand that kindness doesn't equal weakness, and tolerance doesn't equal surrender. The moment you stop defending your peace, it becomes available for anyone to invade. There's a difference between being a good person and being someone who's easily manipulated. Being kind doesn't mean saying yes to everything. Being compassionate doesn't mean you should be anyone's emotional punching bag. When you constantly overextend yourself and never draw a line, people with selfish intentions see you as easy prey. They know you won't say no. They know you'll rationalize their behavior. They know that you'd rather stay uncomfortable than risk conflict, and they use that knowledge. They might not say it out loud, but their actions reveal it clearly. They'll lean on you for favors but disappear when you need support. They'll overstep your time, interrupt your peace, and assume you'll always adjust. Why? Because you've shown them there are no consequences. You've shown them that you value their approval more than your own sanity. Defending yourself doesn't mean being harsh. It means honoring yourself. It means recognizing that if you don't prioritize your well-being, nobody else will. People can only use you if you hand them the tools to do it. And every time you say nothing, every time you let it slide, you're giving them permission to take more than they deserve. We teach people how to treat us by what we allow, by what we stop, and by what we reinforce. If you tolerate disrespect, it becomes a habit in the dynamic. If you let someone speak to you with condescension and you say nothing, they assume it's acceptable, and the cycle continues. It's not about making a scene. It's not about seeking revenge or creating drama. It's about calmly and firmly stating, this is not okay. That sentence has power. And when said with consistency, it becomes a force field. But when you never say it, people stop seeing you as someone who has boundaries at all. They see someone who folds, someone who adjusts, someone who can be bent without breaking. And unfortunately, there are people who are attracted to that kind of pliability, not because they value you, but because they can extract from you without resistance. The world doesn't reward people who constantly sacrifice themselves. It might admire them briefly, but it often forgets them. Real respect comes when you can hold space for others without erasing yourself. You deserve relationships where mutual respect is the standard, not the exception. And that begins with what you defend. If you're always bending just to keep others comfortable, you'll eventually break. That break won't be visible to others, but internally you'll feel the cracks. You'll lose touch with your own voice. You'll start questioning your own worth. The people around you will continue benefiting from your silence, but you'll be the one carrying the weight. This isn't about becoming confrontational or aggressive. It's about being brave enough to say, I matter too. When someone constantly pushes past your emotional boundaries and you say nothing, you're sending the message that your comfort is secondary, that your needs are negotiable, that your time can be disregarded. And people pick up on those signals fast. They might not articulate it, but they feel the freedom to take liberties with your presence. This is why self-defense isn't just physical. It's emotional, mental, and spiritual. It's about saying no without guilt. It's about turning down invitations that drain you. It's about distancing yourself from people who only reach out when they need something. Your energy is sacred. If you don't defend it, others will treat it like it's disposable. And once that happens, reclaiming your ground becomes a far harder task. There's always going to be someone who pushes limits just to see how far they can go. These people don't stop unless they're stopped. They take silence as approval and politeness as weakness. They aren't necessarily evil, but they are opportunistic. If there's no resistance, they'll keep pressing. This is why your first response to being mistreated is crucial. It sets the tone. If you let the first insult slide, the second one will come easier. If you accept being taken for granted once, it becomes expected behavior. The longer it goes unaddressed, the harder it becomes to correct. You find yourself stuck in a cycle where you're constantly giving and never receiving. And the people around you are so used to this dynamic, they get offended when you finally say, enough. They'll accuse you of changing. They'll act like you're overreacting. But in reality, you're just returning to your rightful self, the self that values peace over people-pleasing, the self that no longer accepts crumbs, the self that has learned that what isn't defended will always be exploited. And it's never too late to start that defense. All it takes is the courage to speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. People rarely show gratitude for what they feel entitled to. That's the painful truth. If someone sees your generosity as an expectation, not a gift, they will rarely thank you. And if you never stand up for yourself, they won't see anything wrong with draining your energy. Over time, you'll notice the imbalance. You'll see that when you need support, the same people are suddenly unavailable. When you say no, they act like you betrayed them. That's because you created a version of yourself they came to depend on. Not the real you, but the version that never defends herself. The version that always says yes, always compromises, always bends. But bending constantly leads to breaking. And it's never your responsibility to keep others happy at the expense of your own well-being. You can be loving and still assertive. You can be supportive and still have boundaries. You can give without being exploited. But only if you stop fearing what will happen when you say, that's not okay with me. Defending yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. Because if you don't draw the line, someone will step over it every single time. and you'll keep shrinking until there's nothing left of you. You're not doing anyone a favor by staying quiet about what bothers you. Silence doesn't solve problems, it buries them. And buried problems have a way of resurfacing in unhealthy ways. You start snapping at the wrong people. You lose sleep over unresolved tension. You overthink simple interactions because nothing is clear. That's the emotional cost of not defending yourself. It creates chaos inside of you, even if everything looks peaceful on the outside. You end up sacrificing your clarity just to avoid awkwardness. But here's the thing. Defending yourself doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be direct. A simple, calm expression of your truth can change everything. It lets people know you have a spine. It lets you reclaim your space. It teaches others how to treat you. The longer you avoid this, the more power you give away. And the more power you give away, the harder it becomes to get it back. People aren't wrong for trying to get their way. They're just wrong when they refuse to respect yours. But that respect has to be earned through your consistency. Every time you stand up for yourself, even in a small way, you reclaim a piece of your strength. Not everyone deserves access to your time, your energy, or your kindness. And not everyone will treat it with care. That's why discernment is key. If you never defend what's important to you, people will assume it's not valuable. They'll use you to their advantage, all while calling you a good friend or a great listener. But deep down, you'll feel the imbalance. You'll sense that something isn't right. That's your intuition trying to wake you up. And when it does, don't ignore it. Don't push it away just to maintain surface level peace. Real peace begins with truth. And sometimes the truth is, you've been too available to people who don't deserve it. You've been too forgiving to those who never apologize. You've been too accommodating for the sake of keeping harmony. But harmony that costs you your voice isn't peace. It's quiet suffering. It's emotional imprisonment disguised as being nice. You don't owe anyone your silence. You owe yourself the courage to speak. The more you defend your worth, the fewer people will try to question it. And those who truly value you won't feel threatened when you speak your mind. They'll feel relieved that you finally did. There's always a cost to self-neglect. Maybe not right away, but over time it adds up. You start doubting your decisions. You start questioning your instincts. You second guess your boundaries because you've trained yourself to put others first. But that's not sustainable. Eventually you run out of emotional currency. And when that happens, you crash hard. The people who were benefiting from your silence won't know how to help because they were never really supporting you to begin with. That's why defending yourself isn't just a one-time act. It's a lifestyle. It's choosing every day to honor your truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when it risks rejection, even when it feels lonely. Because the price of constantly being taken advantage of is far greater than the discomfort of a single difficult conversation. And over time, those conversations get easier. You learn to spot the red flags early. You stop tolerating what drains you. You start surrounding yourself with people who uplift rather than deplete you. But it all starts with one choice. The decision to stop letting people take from you just because you never say no. Your defense is your protection. And no one else will build that shield for you. There's a certain freedom that comes when you finally decide to defend yourself. At first, it's terrifying. You worry about what people will think. You fear being misunderstood. But once you realize that living for others' approval is a prison, you start to break free. You discover that your voice has weight, that your feelings are valid, that you don't have to be everything for everyone. The right people won't leave because you spoke your truth. They'll lean in closer. They'll respect you more. They'll adjust, not retreat. But the ones who are only there for their benefit, they'll fade. Let them. Their exit is a blessing in disguise. It's proof that your boundary was necessary. Every time you defend yourself, you realign with your true self. You stop performing and start living. And that's where your power grows. In the small acts of self-respect. In the quiet no that honors your peace. In the firm look that says, I'm not to be taken lightly. People will always test limits, but once they know yours aren't negotiable, they'll think twice before crossing them. That's the beauty of defense. It doesn't just protect you, it transforms you. Piece by piece, you become whole again. One of the hardest truths to accept, but also one of the most empowering. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow, what you tolerate, and what you remain silent about. When someone disrespects you and you brush it off, you send a message, maybe not with your words, but with your actions, that their behavior is acceptable. If someone constantly oversteps your boundaries and you never speak up, they begin to believe that your boundaries either don't exist or don't matter. It's not always about confrontation. Sometimes it's simply about the standard you set for yourself. If you don't demand respect, don't expect others to offer it voluntarily. People test limits, intentionally or unconsciously, and each time you don't push back, you lower your own value in their eyes. It's a silent negotiation that happens in every relationship. You might not realize it, but your reactions teach others how to navigate you. If you let people walk all over you to avoid conflict, don't be surprised when they start sprinting. What you allow becomes the norm, and the longer you allow it, the more rooted it becomes in your dynamic with them. Teaching others how to treat you starts with self-respect. When you value yourself, you naturally set a tone for others to follow. Think of it like this: you are the standard. The way you show up, the way you respond, and the way you handle disrespect are all indicators of how much you respect yourself. If someone cancels on you last minute every time and you keep saying it's okay, you're telling them your time isn't valuable. If someone speaks to you in a condescending tone and you stay silent, you're teaching them you'll accept that kind of communication. We often fear setting boundaries because we don't want to seem rude, aggressive, or difficult. But there's nothing rude about having standards. You are not difficult for expecting basic human decency. People who truly care about you will appreciate those boundaries because they're rooted in self-awareness. But if you keep shrinking yourself to accommodate others, they'll never learn to meet you where you deserve to be met. Instead, they'll keep taking advantage of your silence, your tolerance, your "I understand." Stop letting guilt or fear keep you from defending your space. You're not responsible for other people's comfort when it comes at the cost of your self-worth. You set the bar, and people will rise or fall based on how firmly you hold it. So many of us were conditioned to be nice at all costs. We were taught that being accommodating is virtuous, that saying no is selfish, and that prioritizing ourselves means we're not caring enough. But that kind of mindset is dangerous because it teaches you to sacrifice your boundaries to maintain peace. And let me tell you, peace that comes from pleasing others at your own expense is not peace. It's quiet suffering, wearing a smile while your soul aches from being disrespected over and over again. Every time you say yes when you want to say no. Every time you keep quiet when someone crosses the line. Every time you let something slide because you don't want to rock the boat. You're giving people a blueprint of how to mistreat you. They don't even need to guess where the line is because you've erased it yourself. Being kind does not mean being a doormat. Being loving does not mean accepting mistreatment. You can be gentle and still have steel in your spine. The people who belong in your life will respect your boundaries. The ones who benefit from you having none will call you difficult when you start enforcing them. That's not your burden to carry. There's a power that comes from knowing that the way others treat you is often a reflection of what you've allowed in the past. That doesn't mean you deserve mistreatment. It means you're part of the equation. Every interaction becomes a kind of training session. If someone talks over you and you let it slide, they'll talk over you again. If they borrow money and never pay it back and you never bring it up, they'll borrow again. Your silence, your passive agreement becomes a form of permission. You're teaching them that their behavior has no consequence. And if there's no consequence, there's no motivation to change. People aren't mind readers. They learn from what you tolerate. Your emotional labor, your energy, your presence. These things are valuable. When you give them freely to people who consistently disregard you, you're undervaluing yourself. And eventually, they'll undervalue you too. Don't let your fear of losing people keep you stuck in patterns where you're constantly being undervalued. Let your boundaries be clear. Let your no be final. Let your silence be a statement of separation, not submission. It's not about punishing others. It's about protecting your peace and honoring your worth. What often goes unnoticed is how this lesson echoes through every type of relationship: romantic, familial, professional, and social. You could be at work doing extra hours without recognition, thinking your hard work will speak for itself. But if you never vocalize your expectations or ask for what you deserve, others will assume you're fine with being overlooked. You could be in a romantic relationship where your partner constantly dismisses your emotions, and because you stay, they assume those feelings weren't serious. You teach people not just with your words, but with your patterns. You say I deserve better, but keep going back to what breaks you. That contradiction teaches them they don't need to change. You have to align your boundaries with your behavior. Saying it isn't enough. You have to live it. You have to be willing to walk away from anything that demands you lower your standards just to keep it. The hard truth is this: if you keep accepting crumbs, people will stop offering you the full loaf. You become the reflection of what you accept. That's why setting boundaries isn't about pushing people away. It's about filtering out the ones who only stayed because there were no rules. It's uncomfortable to speak up. It's terrifying to set new boundaries with people who are used to walking all over you. But discomfort is the cost of transformation. The first time you say no, it will feel unnatural. The first time you stop explaining yourself, you might feel rude. But that discomfort isn't wrong. It's the stretching of your self-worth. Every time you choose yourself over your fear of conflict, you reclaim a piece of your power. Boundaries aren't just rules for others. They're declarations of what you will and will not tolerate. And that declaration needs to be consistent. You can't demand respect on Monday and excuse disrespect on Friday. People are always watching your patterns, not your words. If you show inconsistency, they will test it. They will look for the gaps, the weak spots, the moments you cave. And every time you do, you teach them that your boundaries are flexible, that your words aren't anchored by action. You don't owe anyone your silence to keep the peace. You don't owe anyone access to you when they constantly violate your energy. What you allow is what will continue. What you correct is what will stop. There's a deep psychological impact to continuously allowing mistreatment. You start to question your own value. You internalize the disrespect and begin to think it's normal. Slowly, your self-esteem erodes because you've trained yourself to accept less than you deserve. You begin to settle. You stop expecting more. And before long, you forget what healthy treatment even looks like. That's why it's critical to understand the link between your standards and your sense of self. The more you enforce your worth, the more you believe in it. It becomes a cycle. Respect breeds confidence, and confidence reinforces boundaries. You're no longer living in reaction to people's behavior. You're responding with clarity and intent. The way you carry yourself shifts. The energy you emit changes. And people notice. The ones who thrived off your lack of boundaries will resist the change. They'll accuse you of being distant, selfish, or ungrateful. But those who truly care will adjust. They'll meet you where you are because they respect you enough to do so. And if they don't, that's your clarity. That's your confirmation. Not everyone deserves access to you, and how they respond to your boundaries reveals everything. Sometimes the hardest part isn't setting the boundary, it's maintaining it. Especially when people start to test it. They might push back subtly at first, trying to guilt you into compliance. They might act offended, disappointed, or even angry. But that's not a reflection of your wrongness. It's a reaction to your growth. You're no longer playing the role they were comfortable with. You're disrupting the power dynamic, and that will always create friction. But growth always creates friction. The key is consistency. You can't just set a boundary once and hope it sticks. You have to reinforce it every time it's tested. And yes, that's exhausting. Yes, that's emotionally taxing. But what's more exhausting is living a life where your needs don't matter, where your voice goes unheard, where your value is constantly in question. That kind of life drains your soul. Boundaries are hard at first, but over time they become second nature. You stop needing to explain yourself. Your energy does the talking. People either step up or step out, and both outcomes are wins. You're not here to be agreeable at the cost of your identity. You're here to be whole. And that starts with what you allow. Let's not pretend that changing what you allow is easy, especially when you've built relationships based on self-sacrifice. You start to see that the very people you thought cared for you only did so when it was convenient. They were never attached to you. They were attached to your compliance. And when you change the rules, they disappear. That hurts. It's a kind of grief that doesn't get enough attention. The grief of realizing you were only loved for what you gave, not who you are. But that grief is necessary. It's the door to healing. You can't fully step into your worth while dragging the weight of unreciprocated loyalty. Let them go. Let the silence speak for you. Let your absence be the consequence of their behavior. You don't need to beg anyone to treat you right. You don't need to repeat yourself endlessly, hoping they'll change. You just need to stop allowing what breaks you, and yes, you'll lose people. But you'll find yourself You'll rebuild your life on the foundation of self-respect, and that life will be more peaceful, more fulfilling, and more honest than anything built on silence and self-abandonment. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is realizing you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to defend your boundaries to people committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need validation from those who benefit from your silence. You teach people how to treat you not only by what you allow, but by what you walk away from. When you stop showing up for people who constantly hurt you, they get the message. When you no longer answer calls from those who only reach out when they need something, they get the message. Your absence can be louder than any speech. Your withdrawal is your protection. Sometimes the most powerful move is to simply stop engaging. That doesn't mean you hate them. It means you love yourself enough to stop bleeding for those who wouldn't offer you a bandage. Protect your energy. Be selective with your time. You are not required to be available to everyone. You are not responsible for fixing people who keep breaking you. You teach people how to treat you every single day, and the most important lesson is this: you will never be treated better than you treat yourself. Sometimes we betray ourselves in small, quiet ways so subtle that we hardly recognize them until we're drowning in regret. We silence our voice to avoid arguments. We shrink our dreams to avoid making others feel inadequate. We pretend to be okay with things that violate our values because we fear the discomfort of confrontation. This betrayal isn't loud. Often it's a soft surrender, a quiet retreat from who we really are. But over time, these little betrayals pile up. They accumulate like invisible scars, and suddenly we're living a life that doesn't feel like ours. The tragedy is many of us are conditioned to believe that keeping peace means keeping silent. We think that being kind means being compliant, but that's not kindness, it's erasure. The truth is, every time you choose to make someone else more comfortable at the expense of your truth, your needs, or your well-being, you are betraying yourself. You are teaching yourself that your voice doesn't matter, that your boundaries are flexible, and that your worth is negotiable. And if you keep doing it long enough, you will forget what it even feels like to live authentically. There is a cost to making other people comfortable when it comes at your own expense. You might avoid temporary awkwardness, but what you invite in return is a long-term discomfort with yourself. You start censoring your thoughts, softening your opinions, hiding your preferences, all in an effort to be likable, agreeable, non-threatening. And before you know it, you've built a life around the fear of rejection instead of the truth of your desires. You let relationships continue that drain your energy because you don't want to seem cold. You take on more than you can handle at work because you don't want to appear lazy. You agree to plans you dread because you don't want to let someone down. But in all this, you're constantly letting yourself down. That's the betrayal. And it's not just an emotional cost, it affects your health, your mental clarity, your confidence. Because deep inside, your soul knows when you're living out of alignment. You might smile on the outside, but internally you feel hollow. The longer you ignore your own needs, the more resentment builds. And that resentment doesn't go away, it festers. It starts to bleed into how you see others, how you communicate, how you move through the world. All because you chose comfort for others over truth for yourself. Somewhere along the way, we internalized the lie that our worth is tied to our ability to keep others happy. Especially for those raised in environments where approval was conditional, it becomes second nature to people please. You anticipate others' needs before they ask. You edit yourself to avoid rocking the boat. You prioritize harmony over honesty. But the danger in constantly putting others first is that it slowly programs you to put yourself last. You become so adept at reading others' emotions that you lose track of your own. You develop a radar for tension in the room and make it your job to diffuse it, even if you weren't the one who caused it. This hyper-awareness might make you appear compassionate, but it's often rooted in fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of disapproval, fear of being seen as selfish. But here's the truth. Sacrificing your identity to earn love, real love doesn't require you to diminish yourself. Real connection isn't built on pretense. If someone only accepts you when you suppress who you are, they don't truly accept you. And you deserve more than conditional connection. You deserve relationships where your authenticity is not just tolerated, but celebrated. There's nothing noble about dimming your light to keep others comfortable. In fact, it's a disservice to everyone involved. When you betray yourself, you're not just harming yourself, you're teaching others that it's okay to disregard your needs. You're enabling disrespect by not correcting it. You're normalizing imbalance by sustaining it. People learn how to treat you by observing how you treat yourself. If you constantly ignore your own voice, others will too. If you regularly abandon your boundaries, others will assume you don't have any. And that cycle will continue until you interrupt it with courage. Because that's what it takes. Courage. The courage to say, no, this doesn't work for me. The courage to be disliked. The courage to lose approval. That's not easy. It's uncomfortable. Especially if you've spent years seeking validation through self-abandonment. But the freedom on the other side of that discomfort is worth it. Because once you start honoring yourself, you start attracting people who respect you for it. You stop settling for crumbs and start expecting the full meal. You stop chasing peace outside of you and start cultivating it within. And most importantly, you stop being a stranger to yourself. It often starts in childhood, this tendency to prioritize others' comfort. Maybe you had to be the peacemaker in a chaotic home. Maybe your emotions were dismissed, so you learned to suppress them. Maybe you were praised for being mature when what you really were was silently suffering. Whatever the origin, the pattern follows you into adulthood. You become the reliable one, the agreeable one, the selfless one, but what you really become is exhausted. Because self-sacrifice as a lifestyle is unsustainable. There's nothing wrong with caring for others. But it becomes dangerous when it's compulsive. When it's compulsive to the point that you don't even recognize your own needs anymore. You get so used to checking in on everyone else that you forget to check in with yourself. You wear a mask of strength while inside you're breaking down. And people keep expecting more from you because you've never shown them a limit. But just because you've been doing it doesn't mean you have to keep doing it. You have the right to evolve. You have the right to say, I can't keep abandoning myself for the sake of others. Because if you keep doing it, eventually, there will be nothing left of you to give. You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that pleases them. You don't owe anyone silence in the face of mistreatment. You don't owe anyone compliance when your soul is screaming for expression. What you owe is to yourself. To live truthfully, to honor your spirit, to stand firm in your values. But this requires a radical shift in mindset. It requires replacing guilt with self-respect. It requires letting go of the idea that your job is to manage how others feel about you. That's not your job. Your job is to live in integrity. And the irony is, when you start doing that, the people who truly love you won't leave. They'll rise to meet you. And the ones who can't handle your authenticity, let them go. Because if someone only values the version of you that betrays yourself, that's not love. It's control. And control masquerading as love is one of the most dangerous illusions. You deserve relationships built on truth, not manipulation. You deserve peace that comes from alignment, not appeasement. So start showing up for yourself the way you always show up for others. Start choosing yourself, not as an act of rebellion, but as an act of reverence. One of the hardest truths to accept is that not everyone will understand or support your decision to stop betraying yourself. Some people will call it selfish. Others will accuse you of changing, and the truth is, you are changing. You're changing the story. You're refusing to be the person who bends so far backward that you break. You're refusing to keep playing a role in someone else's script when your own voice has gone unheard. That's growth. That's power. But it's also lonely at times. Because stepping into authenticity often means stepping away from people who benefited from your self-abandonment. It means enduring the discomfort of disappointing others so you can stop disappointing yourself. And it's in that space, in the silence between who you were and who you are becoming, that you begin to rebuild. You begin to rediscover your preferences, your passions, your voice. You begin to realize that your worth was never meant to be negotiated. And though the path may feel uncertain, it's the only one that leads to freedom. Because true peace doesn't come from keeping everyone else happy. It comes from finally honoring the truth that lives inside you. It's tempting to think that comfort equals safety, but sometimes what we call safety is actually stagnation. You stay quiet in a relationship where you're not respected because it's better than being alone. You stay in a job that devalues you because at least it pays the bills. You keep friendships that drain you because it's better than having no one. But all of these justifications are rooted in fear. And fear is a terrible architect for your life. Living small to avoid discomfort isn't safety. It's slow self-erasure. And at some point you have to choose your truth or their comfort. You have to decide what matters more, being liked for who you're not or being loved for who you are. That choice won't always be obvious or easy, but it is necessary. Because you can't be both fully authentic and universally accepted. There will always be people who are uncomfortable with your boundaries, your growth, your strength. Let them be uncomfortable. That's not your burden to carry. Your only job is to be true, to keep returning to the deepest part of yourself and asking, what is honest? What is kind to me? And then to act accordingly, even when it's hard. Every time you stop yourself from saying what you need to say, every time you minimize your pain, every time you smile when you want to cry, you are teaching yourself that your truth is not valid. That's a deep betrayal, because your truth matters. Your needs matter. Your feelings matter. And if you keep hiding them just to maintain appearances, you'll begin to lose touch with your inner compass. You'll start looking outward for guidance, for affirmation, for identity. But the truth is never outside of you, it's within you. And accessing that truth requires honesty, not just with others, but with yourself. It requires the willingness to feel discomfort and move through it, instead of avoiding it at all costs. Because what you resist persists, but what you face transforms. You were not put here to be invisible. You were not created to be a vessel for other people's comfort. You were meant to live fully, speak boldly, love deeply. That starts with honoring yourself, not in theory, but in practice, in the choices you make, in the boundaries you set, in the way you show up, not for others, but for your own soul. So when you find yourself biting your tongue, shrinking your truth, pretending everything is okay when it's not, pause. Ask yourself, am I betraying myself right now to make someone else more comfortable? If the answer is yes, that's your signal to choose differently. Not because it's easy, but because you deserve better, because your peace matters more than their temporary satisfaction, because your truth is not negotiable. You are allowed to change the terms. You are allowed to grow out of roles that were rooted in survival, not authenticity. You are allowed to stop being the caretaker of everyone else's emotions and start being the protector of your own. That shift doesn't make you rude, it makes you real. And being real is the most courageous thing you can do in a world that profits from your pretending. So stop betraying yourself. Start honoring the whisper that says, there's more for me than this, because there is. And it starts the moment you stop choosing their comfort over your truth. Real strength is not always measured in how much you can endure or how often you say yes to the demands of others. It is often hidden in the quiet power of saying no without flinching, without guilt, and most importantly, without apology. In a world that teaches us to accommodate, to be agreeable, to put others before ourselves, saying no feels like a rebellion. But it is in that rebellion that we reclaim our identity. We've been conditioned to think that being liked is more important than being respected. But true respect is earned when people see that you have boundaries, when you do not bend yourself out of shape just to make others feel better. You do not owe the world constant access to your time, your energy, or your kindness. There is nothing selfish about protecting your space. And the ability to say no without attaching shame to it is a sign of emotional maturity. People may not always like it, but those who truly care for you will learn to understand it. Saying no without apology is not a declaration of war. It is a quiet act of self-preservation, and it requires more courage than saying yes ever will. You are not here to be everyone's savior, emotional crutch, or punching bag. The more you say yes to others at the cost of your own well-being, the more you betray yourself. There is a difference between being kind and being compliant, and too often we confuse the two. Real strength is knowing when your yes would be a lie and refusing to give it. Every time you say yes when your heart says no, you give away a piece of yourself, your peace, your truth, your sanity. You teach people how to treat you by the way you treat yourself, and if you constantly overextend, they will believe it's okay to expect that from you. Eventually, resentment builds up. You'll start to feel unappreciated, misunderstood, even invisible. But it's not their fault. It's yours for not drawing the line. People are not mind readers. You must show them what you allow and what you do not. A clear no is far more honest than a forced yes. You don't have to justify it with reasons that make sense to them. Your peace is reason enough. When you start honoring your truth over pleasing others, you'll feel an unfamiliar freedom. That's real strength. There is a kind of freedom that comes when you no longer feel the need to over-explain yourself. The moment you stop diluting your no with softening words, you begin to reclaim your voice. You do not need to add, "I'm sorry, but," or "maybe another time," if it's not true. That's just you trying to ease their reaction, trying to stay liked instead of being clear. Strength means you are no longer available for manipulation. People will guilt trip you, shame you, call you selfish or even cold, but remember, those are the tactics of those who've grown too comfortable with your compliance. When you start saying no, they'll be forced to adjust or leave, and both are blessings. You have every right to choose your own peace over someone else's comfort. You're not here to carry their burdens just because you once did. It is not your job to shrink so they feel tall. Saying no is a boundary, not a betrayal. Let them think what they want. You are not responsible for their emotions, only for your truth. That kind of strength, unapologetic and firm, is rare and necessary, especially in a world that feeds on people-pleasing. You'll be surprised how much of your life improves when you start exercising your right to say no. Your time becomes yours again. Your energy stops bleeding into things that don't serve you. Your mental health begins to recover. For too long, people have been feeding off your inability to say no, counting on your silence, your guilt, your habit of making yourself smaller. But when you realize that you can stand firm without falling into the trap of over-explaining or seeking permission, something inside you changes. That fear of disappointing others starts to lose its grip. The world doesn't fall apart when you say no, and if someone walks away because of it, then they were never really in your corner to begin with. Strength isn't loud or aggressive. Sometimes it's the quiet refusal to betray yourself. And when you no longer apologize for choosing yourself, you begin to attract a different energy. One that respects you, values you, and doesn't depend on your sacrifice to thrive. That's when you'll know you're stepping into your power. That's when you realize no is a complete sentence, and one that has the power to rebuild your entire life. So many people spend their lives in the prison of yes, afraid to let someone down, afraid to lose love, respect, or approval. But what about the love and respect you owe yourself? Every yes that comes from fear rather than choice chips away at your integrity. You don't have to be rude to be firm. You don't have to be aggressive to be clear. Saying no with calm confidence is far more powerful than saying yes through gritted teeth. People may not like it, but they will come to respect it or they'll leave. And in doing so, make room for people who do. Real strength isn't found in controlling how others feel about your no. It's found in no longer needing their understanding to make your truth valid. You owe no one an explanation for guarding your heart, your peace, your priorities. We've been taught to keep the peace at all costs, but peace that costs your self-respect isn't peace. Saying no is not rejection, it's redirection. It keeps you aligned with your values, your energy, and your truth. And there is no greater freedom than that. Many times, the hardest person to say no to is not others, it's yourself. The part of you that still believes your worth is tied to how much you do for others, how much you bend, how much you're willing to sacrifice. That part of you that's terrified of being alone, or being seen as difficult, or cold, or uncaring. But that's not truth, that's conditioning. You were likely taught that love must be earned, that boundaries are walls, and that selfishness is a sin. But saying no doesn't make you unkind, it makes you honest. It makes you self-aware. And the more you practice it, the less guilt you'll feel. You'll realize that taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Every strong person you admire got that way by learning to say no, by protecting their energy and standing firm even when it was hard. Saying no to what drains you is saying yes to what fulfills you. And when you operate from that place, you stop surviving and start living. You begin to choose from a place of clarity, not fear. And that shift, that quiet, powerful shift, is how you begin to transform your life from the inside out. There will always be people who take your boundaries personally. Let them. That reaction says more about them than it does about you. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always see your growth as an offense. But your job is not to keep others comfortable at the expense of your sanity. Your job is to honor your soul, your body, your mind. You were not put here to be used up. You were not put here to constantly explain, defend, or justify your truth. Real strength is choosing peace over performance. It's choosing rest over constant availability. It's choosing depth over drama. When you say no without apology, without anger, and without guilt, you give yourself permission to live more fully. You are no longer reacting. You're responding with intention. And that's when life changes. That's when you begin to realize how much of your energy has been wasted on things that didn't even deserve a second of your time. You start to become deliberate, intentional, and unbothered. Not because you don't care, but because you finally do. About yourself, about your purpose, about your peace. And there is no greater strength than that. The world will not reward your burnout. It will not honor the fact that you said yes when you should have said no. It will not give you a medal for being constantly exhausted, overly available, or endlessly self-sacrificing. That's the lie we've been sold, that if you just give enough, love enough, sacrifice enough, one day it will be respect. But the truth is, people respect you when you respect yourself. They value you when you value your time. They take you seriously when you set the tone. Saying no without apology is about setting the tone of your life. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to be liked by everyone because you like yourself. It's about showing up as someone who knows their worth and doesn't water it down to fit someone else's comfort zone. That's the strength that builds empires. That's the strength that creates lasting peace. You will find that the more you protect your time, your energy, your heart, the more aligned your life becomes. And from that alignment comes clarity, focus, purpose, and joy. Not because life gets easier, but because you finally decided to stop making it harder by saying yes when you mean no. So here's the truth, plain, raw, and undeniable. You've spent far too long betraying yourself in silence, nodding yes when your soul screamed no, shrinking so others could feel big, and allowing people to write the rules of your life with their comfort in mind. But that chapter ends now. You weren't born to be a background character in your own story. You weren't created to be a mirror for other people's needs while yours gather dust in the dark. You are not weak for setting boundaries. You are not wrong for valuing your time, your peace, your worth. Every time you say no, without apology, you reclaim a piece of yourself. You draw a line in the sand and say, I matter too. This speech is a wake-up call. Not to harden your heart, but to open your eyes. Real strength isn't in how many people you please. It's in how many times you choose yourself over the pressure to be agreeable. It's in refusing to explain your worth or negotiate your value. You've taught people how to treat you by what you've tolerated, but now it's time to rewrite that lesson. From this moment forward, let your silence speak louder than your explanations. Let your no echo with the weight of self-respect. Let your decisions align with your truth instead of others' expectations. They may call you difficult, let them. They may walk away, let them, because those who belong in your life will never be threatened by your boundaries. They will rise to meet you, not drain you. And as you step into this power, you begin to see that everything you were chasing through overgiving, love, respect, peace, was never meant to come from outside. It was already waiting inside you, buried under years of compromise. Now you dig it up, now you own it. So stand tall, even when your voice shakes. Say no when you need to, say yes only when it's real. Let your presence be felt not by how much you endure, but by how firmly you protect what makes you whole. You do not owe anyone your exhaustion. You do not need permission to honor your soul. This is your life. Stop apologizing for living it on your terms. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being brave enough to face yourself. May your journey from here be filled with clarity, courage, and conviction. And above all, may you never forget, real power is quiet, but it is unshakable. God bless you. Stay strong.